I'm talking to Leanne Kaye. Leanne is a UK trained midwife and CEO and co-founder of Pregnant in the City. Hi Leanne, how are you?
Hi, very well, thanks.
Leanne, what would you say are 5 of the best tips you can give on breastfeeding?
Okay, so I might have a few more than 5, but the 5 best tips would be, the number 1 tip in big, bold, neon sign would be, let everybody else do everything else in the house, the cleaning, the cooking, the organizing of the siblings, if there is any yet, preparing things. All I suggest to new mums, especially when you get home in that first month, is concentrate on breastfeeding your baby. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed out of bed or out of the house, but there are cultures around the world, and you just see their breastfeeding weeks are so successful because this is all they do. They have a lying-in period. I trained in Birmingham, in England, and as a high Muslim population, and a lot of those women, and a lot of actually Chinese women as well, it's very cultural that they have a lying-in period. And it just means that the breastfeeding just happens so much easier because they're not expected to do anything. They're not arriving at the door, opening the door to the guest, offering them tea and cake, feeling stressed that the house looks a mess, feeling stressed that they might not be looking great, worrying that the husband has something to eat. You know, I just go back to my number 1 tip is let everybody do everything else. All you need to focus on and worry about is breastfeeding your baby. And really, you know, visitors can wait. And all that kind of, all the other stuff that goes on when you've just had a baby. And I think women that have had more than 1 or more than 2 or more than 4 will say eventually they learned to say no to visitors so that they could focus entirely on the breastfeeding and the baby and healing and their body healing itself. So that's number 1. Get everybody to do everything else. Number 2, which is also really high priority for me, for any women, even if you've breastfed before but it's been a while, is take a preparation class. Take a breastfeeding preparation class. Sounds a bit odd. You're sitting there, no baby, you've got your bump. I run breastfeeding preparation classes now online and in Tel Aviv and in Renana. And during the class, we have 2 hours. It's still not quite long enough, but it's long enough for people to sit still. And there's a lot of things that we can discuss and prevent. I really believe a lot of the key things going on with breastfeeding happen within the first hour and the first 24 hours. By the time you've called somebody like me, that you've already maybe you already got a problem that you didn't need to get. So this is sort of my way of helping women prevent those things occurring. And also, once you've been to my breastfeeding preparation class, you go away with a nice little booklet, and it has a shopping list. It has a nice little thing to pull out of how to store your breast milk that you'll want to keep. And you can use it, write a few notes on it, so it's alive, it's your notes. Because often people say, I'm never going to remember any of that. But, you know, that's something to bear in mind. Breastfeeding preparation. You can read loads online, and I really highly recommend that, although don't drive yourself too mad and get too overly anxious. But also meet somebody, like me, you know, meet somebody that you're going to want to maybe call afterwards. You've already got that kesha, you've already got that relationship with me. And then, you know, really good point. So preparation for breastfeeding. So number 1 is let everyone do everything else. Number 2, prepare for breastfeeding with a lesson. Number 3, now I thought about this one a lot. I think get prepared with equipment. So have the right cream. I recommend a few, you know, you can go to the website, you can go into all the different shops. Just a quick tip, quick warning. Some of the breastfeeding creams are very gloopy. The very common ones are very gloopy, and I don't actually love those ones as much. They might do the job and heal you if you're already really sore, but I also recommend you can use a preventative cream, which is more like a lotion, and you just put on every time after you've breastfed. You check that it's one that can be used, that the baby can feed. You don't need to sort of be washing it off because then you've really caused yourself damage. So yeah, nipple cream. Have your nipple creams at the ready. Even invest in a couple of options because you don't know what you're going to like when you get your baby home. So rather than you get sore, then you're telling somebody to go and collect it for you. Imagine the husband or the mother-in-law is running around the shop trying to find what you're on about. So get these things before. Nipple cream, that's number 3. Number 4 is know where you're going to breastfeed. Prepare, as another thing that I do if I come to your home and do a breastfeeding class is I want to see where you're going to breastfeed. If it's a chair, if it's the bed, if you spend most of your life in front of the TV or in front of the laptop, we all have our own little place we like to be. And it's good to prepare that area. Included in that is to buy a breastfeeding cushion. I do love the cushions, but big note of warning, don't get too attached to the cushion. I like the idea of women being able to leave the house and even pop to a friend's house without throwing the cushion in the car or taking it with the agala, with the stroller. Not a good idea, but still, definitely buy a good cushion and have a look and have a feel, and we're all different. Some women have quite bad back problems, and I recommend there's ones that have a clip that tie around your back. They're great. And there's other ones. Also depends on your body shape. Like, go around to the shops, have a look online, breastfeeding pillow. So, and the last one I'd say is another equipment issue is it sounds really simple, this one, water. Never stop breastfeeding without water next to you. And you might get used to it and you might think, okay, I've got my glass of water ready. But what I really say to women is have one of those sports bottles. And if you've met me during your pregnancy, you'll probably know that I love those. Just because anything you can do with one hand really easily that isn't going to spill, the glass of water next to you can spill, and you've got the jiggling baby, and you're trying to latch him, and you're trying to grab the water. So, good tip, sports bottle, whether it's one a reusable thing, the ones that you bite it and pull it up, and always have at least 500 mils, really a lot of water next to you before you sit down to feed. The baby can be screaming and crying and everything's flustered around. Just get the water and then down. So that's my 5.
What's the importance of the water?
Okay, so as you're breastfeeding, it dehydrates you. It causes your body is expelling fluid. It's like, they say it's like going for a marathon. Some women find it's great for weight loss because you're breastfeeding and it helps weight loss postnatally, but often that isn't the case. It's not a myth. It is true, but women compensate. We all eat more, so you're not necessarily going to lose weight if you're eating 10 times what your body needs. It's the equivalent to going for a jog. So if you're doing that, maybe more than a jog, but approximately, your body's having to expend all this energy, so you will feel thirsty. So the comfort level, have the water next to you, and from a physiological level, you need the water in order to breastfeed. Your milk will be much better and will flow better if you're hydrated. A woman that's dehydrated or hungry, the milk's going to mirror that. It's going to be of a lesser quality.
And are there any foods or drinks that you should try and avoid while you're breastfeeding?
That's another great question. Now, having worked cross-culturally with all people from all over the world, I would say that depending on what your diet is, so if you happen to live off a lot of spicy foods, which you have here in Israel, then your baby's gonna have been getting used to that while she's been pregnant. The woman that eats garlic all the time, her baby's going to be used to that taste, and it actually travels and goes through the breast milk, and the breast milk has a taste. So really what I say to women is, in the main, stick to what you're used to. If you haven't had strawberries for the entire pregnancy, but you think strawberries are good for me, I'm going to go get the strawberries. I had one client that went and ate a whole, big bowl of strawberries, 2 lots, that's way too much. But she thought, I'm being healthy and I'm mushing my strawberries and going in the breast milk and isn't this great? The baby had a bad tummy because that woman, the body wasn't used to eating any strawberries, and too much. So everything in moderation. I do think there's a few things that are known causes of problems during breastfeeding, but I don't like to scare people or overcomplicate the situation. What your diet regularly is should be absolutely fine for the baby. Some people talk about cabbages causing more wind in their babies. I more like to say, okay, don't limit yourself. Just eat, live normally. Try and have a very balanced diet, a very healthy diet. There's a lot of good foods you can have. But in terms of what to avoid, really You know, the usual things that they say for yourself, you know, with stimulants, caffeine, chocolate, any overly processed foods, over sugary foods. Interestingly, I read the other day that alcohol will pass through, and I have to be on the line that it's not recommended whilst you're breastfeeding. But if you're going to, just know that it might not necessarily make the baby sleepy. I often hear women saying, oh, I have a glass of wine, the baby will be more sleepy, when actually it can stimulate the baby, and the baby can have a much more restless night's sleep. So, no, in the main, I'd say avoid alcohol, avoid smoking, which isn't a food, but yeah. So that's my tips with eating. Eat what you normally eat. Do not eat anything to excess. Anything to excess may cause a problem for the baby.
Is it possible to overfeed your baby?
When you're breastfeeding, I'd say no. It's not possible to overfeed the baby. I think the baby will let you know if they're sucking and sucking and sucking for comfort. They'll tend to have wind and posit some back again. And I firmly believe it's very difficult to overfeed a breastfed baby. Some babies do get quite chubby on breast milk, but in the main, often a breastfed baby's growth will be different. Will be actually slightly less than a formula-fed baby. And again, recently, in the last 12 months, the World Health Organization have finally produced a breastfed baby weight chart, growth chart, so that the women aren't all putting themselves against the lines of the formula-fed babies, which is very, very different and can cause a lot of stress. So can you overfeed a breastfed baby? No. Can you overfeed a bottle-fed baby? Absolutely, yes, you can. And you do have to be a little bit more careful. With breastfeeding as well, there's a lot more effort involved. So the baby's not really going to keep making that effort to draw the milk out if they're already full. Whereas if you put a bottle into a baby's mouth, because the nature of it is a lot easier for the baby, there's a lot less energy that they have to exert in order to get the milk. They can overeat a lot easier with formula.
Is it safe to breastfeed your baby if you're sick?
Yes, that's a very good question. I often get calls about that. It's absolutely safe to breastfeed. In fact, it's recommended to breastfeed when your baby when you're feeling sick, because you're passing on that immunity to your baby, and there's absolutely no reason to stop breastfeeding altogether. There may be certain circumstances, certain diseases, certain situations where, I'm not there to sort of give that decision. But in the main, if you have a viral cold, flu, something going on where you're feeling under the weather, it's fine to continue breastfeeding.
Does a breastfed baby need any extra vitamins, or is everything provided in the breast milk?
Now, that's quite a controversial question, in that you would think that the baby gets everything the baby needs from the mother. And in a simple form, yes, the baby does. But nowadays, we are supplementing, babies are supplemented with vitamin D. And this is all to do with sunlight. And being from the UK, it was never, for years, it was never given. But literally, I think it's in the last 2 years, from what my colleagues back in the UK tell me, that they have started giving vitamin D, because they're saying that by early childhood, age 5, 6, all these children are coming up deficient in vitamin D, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And really what it is that we're not exposing our children to sunlight. In hot climates, we're protecting them because we're so scared of the ozone layer and skin damage. And in cooler climates where there isn't so much sun, they're not even getting the regular dose of daylight because they're traveling by car everywhere. They're sitting in front of screens and playing video games and watching TV, so they're not playing out as much. And it really has had an impact. So now they're suggesting that every baby from birth is being given, breastfed or not breastfed, is being given vitamin D. And the other thing that children are given is iron drops. And the third thing that babies are given is, people confuse it. It's called vitamin K. It's actually not a vitamin. It's given at the birth, whether you're going to breastfeed or not breastfeed. and that's to prevent hemorrhagic disease of the newborn, which is a posh way of saying internal bleeding. It prevents the baby having internal bleeding. That only affects the statistic. It only affects a very, very small percentage of babies, but in order to never hear of it again, that's been installed, and that's given to your baby. So if you hear them talking about vitamin K, that's what that is. So the two things that you'll be bringing home and that you should buy are the vitamin D and the iron drops.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you so much.